So Billy, what are you hearing from
We're
the
about
return?
we're about to be live. We're about to be
Okay.
live. we can have the small talk, but we're about to be live.
That's fine.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Tennessee Holler Facebook Live. I'm Holler founder Justin Canoe. We are tnholler.com, at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. We are live streaming right now on both of those things. So if you want to talk to us, just reply to the stream or use the hashtag Holler Live. Today we have with us two really good people who I've come to know over the course of the last few years. Union reps, union fighters, VONDA MCDANIEL from the Central Labor Council and Billy DYCUS from the AFL-CIO, both presidents of those organizations. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well, doing well.
We're great. Thank you for having us, Justin.
Absolutely. Well, Vonda, I'll start with you real quick. Just tell me, how are you holding up through this ordeal? And what are you doing to get through the virus times?
So we've been sheltering in place, but we've been holding up pretty good. We're fortunate to be able to work from home, but we've been out fighting for workers that have been calling us that are not as fortunate, that don't have the ability to work from home. So we're continuing to work, continuing to fight.
And Billy, how about you? You said that you've been putting some child labor to use.
Well, it's it's been a good time. Yeah, I think a lot of folks are actually stepping back a little bit too, Justin, and thinking about how much time they're spending with their children and their grandchildren. And I've taken advantage of it. Our children don't get enough skills. Not saying our teachers aren't doing a job, but we've taken skills training out of education. So, when I can apply geometry to how to square a building and show my grandson how to do that, show him how to use a hammer instead of a nail gun, and how to, read a tape measure instead of tick marks, at sixteenths, eighths, quarters, 3/16, and say, hey, cut this board. And he can now drive a nail. When we first started, he said, I don't understand how you drive a nail and not hit the board. And I said, well, see these two fingers I've smashed? I've smashed them enough. I've smashed them enough that you'll learn to focus on the nail and not hit your hand. But it's been a good experience in that way. We're fortunate, like Vonda said, to be able to work from home. There's a lot of folks that don't have that ability. And just like we were talking about prior, when kids are out of school, if you are having to go to work, somebody's got to take care of those children. And if you're having to find some place to put them, that's difficult because nobody's taking them. So what do you do? And what a struggle that is for people that are trying to find a way to live and take care of their children. And then you've got the virus. Do you take your grandchildren? Do you take your children to your grandparents' house? And what are the potential for exposure to the older folks? So it's a tough time for a lot of folks. Ron and I are blessed. We'll tell you that the labor movement's been good to us, and it's good to the folks in the labor movement. And hopefully when we move out of this thing, I thought about this today. There's a lot of focus on returning back to normal. I don't think we're ever going back to normal. But I do think that it's an opportunity, especially for those people that work in those restaurants that are making whatever it is, $2.25 an hour plus tips, which is outlandish to think that that's how it works. There's an opportunity for those individuals that are working in those areas that for us to go in and say, hey, there's a better way. There's a way for you to organize, move forward without being abused at the workplace, because apparently they're pretty essential, because we got to get those folks back to work, and that's kind of crazy.
Well, that's right. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from all of this is which workers are essential. And it's a lot of them. And it's the ones that have been underappreciated for far too long. Full disclosure, I'm in a union. I'm in the WGA, the Writers Guild. I ran for Congress. You guys were very supportive. And what I want to know from you guys, first of all, before we talk about the economic recovery group, which doesn't include any workers or any worker representatives, from a worker's perspective, what was the landscape like in Tennessee before this happened? You know, how supportive or unsupportive of workers, of unions, has this state been? Can you just give us a sense of the landscape? Vonda, why don't we start with you? In Tennessee, what is it like for workers, and is this state government supportive?
So I'll defer to Billy on the state landscape, but I'll talk about Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Every time you turn on the television, they talk about Nashville as a city on the rise. And so is the regional area that Nashville exists in Middle Tennessee. We've seen a lot of growth, but union family, we've also seen a rise in wage theft and worker injuries in the workplace, particularly in construction. We've seen a hospitality industry that has grown astronomically on the backs of workers. We are seeing a slow tick up in terms of the pay for hospitality workers simply because of supply and demand. But those are some of the things. Tennessee being a right to work state, employers come to Tennessee because they have the flexibility to pay workers less than they should. What we're seeing, because we haven't expanded Medicaid expansion, is we've seen rural hospitals close. We've seen, growth in the healthcare industry in Nashville, but that's from the corporate side. And now we're seeing that there's definitely a need for more nurses and more techs and more folks that actually do the work in hospitals. So, being a region on the rise, we have workers haven't exactly experienced the prosperity that we've been seeing in terms of growth in Middle Tennessee.
Right. And I think it's important for people to realize that unions help keep a balance. We can grow and people cannot participate in the upside of that. And, over the course of our history, whether it be weekends or overtime pay or child labor laws, there's all sorts of things that everybody benefits from, not just union members. And I think that gets lost in the conversation, that unions help lift up the bottom for everybody and help increase the competitiveness for everybody. And without that balance, you end up having a lot of people left behind. And Tennessee is at the bottom in poverty, at the bottom in minimum wage jobs. So, there is a cost that comes with the attack on unions. Billy, can you talk a little bit about that cost, about how maybe the lack of worker empowerment has put us in a place where something as simple as a stoppage of work for a month or 6 weeks can put so many people on the brink of disaster?
Yep.
I think, Justin, Vonda kind of hit on it with the right to work issue. We're in a right to work state, and you even said it. Look, if it was so good and the economy was booming according to the folks in state government, but if it's so good, why do we have 678,000 underinsured people in the state of Tennessee? Why have we given away billions of our own dollars to not expand Medicaid? I don't get it. And then you like you said, we're at the low end of minimum wage. We're at the top of the country in minimum wage jobs. So, it goes to show you that there's more interest in making business profitable than it is to making people livable. And maybe, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but when we don't have enough people insured in this state and we have all these folks on minimum wage, what are we really doing for the folks in Tennessee? And if it's kind of like, and Vonda knows me, I get on religion occasionally, but not too much. People of religion want other people to have it because of how good it feels. Same thing goes for being in a union. You love it you feel it, you know what you have, and you want to share it with people. And sometimes, when people push back and say, well, a union's not necessary anymore, or, all you want to do is, bankrupt the companies. And it's just the total opposite. What we're there for is to make sure, like you said, everybody has an equal opportunity. Everybody has a chance to move forward. And, we've seen it in the last 6 weeks. I don't know how, $1,200 is not going to pay rent very long. Especially in Davidson County, or really out in the rural counties. There's, you rent a single wide trailer, even out in the country, it's going to cost you $600 a month. How are you going to pay utilities and feed your children? We have seen what right to work's done. You can look at poverty rates around 20% in almost all the right to work states. Then you hear the argument, well, look, the jobs left Michigan. Car plants left Michigan. They left everywhere. They either went to the South or Mexico or China. It's not like they flooded down to all the right to work states and started building multi-million-dollar factories. And if they did, similar to what went on in Volkswagen, they got almost $1 billion of taxpayer money. So we could take $1 billion of taxpayer money and lift everybody out of poverty.
Well, I just want people to know that we can see the comments. Virginia Shaw says right to work is bad and bust unions. Robert Schooner says some people make less than minimum wage. There's a lot to talk about here. The numbers are very clear, though, over the course of the last 40 years, that union participation and the share of wealth controlled by the middle class are neck and neck there. It is undeniable. The graphs go down side by side. So the more union participation there is, the stronger unions are, the more robust middle class we have. And to me, a stronger economy is built on the back of a middle class. It's not trickle down. It's the middle out. It's the more we have people that are willing to buy things, the more we have people that are spending their money that feel secure. That's how our economy is most robust. And that's what history has shown us. Let's talk about what just happened recently. We now have the virus. We have a lot of people in trouble. Hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans have filed for unemployment, 20 million in the country over the course of the last 3 weeks. And now Governor Lee is opening the economy back up, and he has put together this economic recovery group, but has left out workers and worker representatives. I'll go back to you, Billy, because you put out a statement about this recently. What did your statement say, and how surprised were you or not that Governor Lee made that decision?
Well, basically in the statement, it said that it's just a travesty that, nobody from any working class individual is on that group as far as the industry group is concerned. And it doesn't surprise me. Look, Governor Lee is notoriously anti-union, and you're not going to expect him to put even any union member on there, but it's even more a slap in the face to the working people. What about working people? It doesn't have to be a union person, but where are the working people? You see, look, and I have respect for some folks on that list. I deal with them; they have a job to do. But there's the other, the other side of that is, did you notice was there anybody from Tennessee OSHA on that list? So where are the workers' concerns? Where are we with really and truly putting people back to work? Look, I understand that people want to get out. It's beautiful outside. People want to get out and move around. I understand it. And I do understand people want to go back to work. Some people do. Some people are worried and concerned, but at the end of the day, if we just rush back in, who's going to be responsible for the end result? Who are they going to blame? Who's it going to be? And we, have a choice to make. I think one thing that we've seen out of this is it's brought out the good in people. It's brought out the bad in people. And we go back to minimum wage and low wage workers. Those folks are living day to day, not week to week, like some people would like to think. And so when you start putting pressure on that part of the economy, then people are going to get restless because you start making life and death decisions, and because it affects not only yourself, but your children and, and your family. And you see it in some of the stuff that's going on around the country, where people are saying things and doing things that you would never expect. Worrying about haircuts, and because I don't have to worry about those things, but you know what I'm saying. So
well, and the skeptic in me thinks that on some level, we've seen that self-employed people have had trouble getting benefits now. We've seen the money that was promised to students has not shown up. The people that have lobbyists and special interest groups, they've gotten theirs, but it's the people that don't, that haven't. And you start to wonder, is some of this being done to put the pressure on people to get that go back to work thing going? So Vonda, I'll go to you now. What was your reaction to workers being left out of the economic recovery group?
So, especially in a state like Tennessee, it's very important that workers are able to go back to work as quickly as possible. But we have to do that in a way that is safe and that does not, all being home for 6 weeks, if we go back to work immediately with no safeguards in place, then that exacerbates a problem that we're having. So one of the things that the AFL nationally, from the local level to the state level to the national level, there are some principles in place to reopen the economy that I think will help to move it in a positive direction for workers. And that is just like this conversation is about, that workers are included at every level of the decision-making process, that the decision to reopen the economy is based on science and not on dates, that there are increases in the access to personal protection equipment. You go in stores, the essential workers, their employers should be giving them masks. They should be taking temperatures. They should be making sure that social distance is ensured, so that those workers remain safe. There should be increases in reliable, rapid testing. We are beginning to see that in Tennessee. In many of the counties throughout the state, we saw long lines where people are able to go take a test, not just if you're sick, but we're going to have to be able to ramp that up in order to open the economy in a way that's safe for workers. So those are some of the things that I'm not sure that the folks that are advising Governor Lee are making sure are part of the recovery process. And that's why they need folks like me and Billy there to make sure that they're doing this thing right.
Right, because otherwise you have only one side of the conversation. You have the side of the conversation that says, let's get back to work. And if you don't have the other side of that, which is, okay, but how do we protect ourselves? How do we make sure that we don't do this too fast and have a relapse, which is frankly the worst possible thing for business and for the economy? It doesn't seem like they necessarily have that part of the conversation. And we've already seen through the course of the decision-making process that they have not been forthcoming with a lot of the information. Their PPE decisions were, he came out and said, oh, we haven't done makeshift in Tennessee. Well, the Tennessee Department of Health had been telling doctors to strap diapers on their faces before that. So it's hard to really trust anything we're being told right now. And it would be nice to have workers in this conversation, or workers reps. And in other countries, that's how it works. I don't think people realize that in other countries, workers have a much stronger voice. For instance, in Germany, workers have board seats at these companies so that when downturns happen like this, workers feel heard and they're much more willing to give and participate in the downturn, as opposed to this, where we have this much more adversarial relationship. So, there are other ways to do things here. And that brings me to one of the things that I wanted to ask you both about. Not too long ago, we had the UAW go on strike. And one of the first things that GM did was cut their health insurance off. What do you think this virus has told us about employer-based insurance as the answer moving forward to our healthcare woes? to me, it has exposed that argument as insufficient, to put it mildly. And is that something that we should take off the table, and we should be pushing for a more organic universal healthcare system? I thought that even before the virus, the GM situation really showed us that we need to take that axe out of the hands of bosses and not let them cut off people's health insurance. So is employer-based insurance the answer?
So what I believe is that this virus and the strikes have exposed a fault line. It has shown that when folks get laid off and the first thing that happens is they lose their health care, then that prevents them from being able to go to the doctor and creates even a larger health emergency for everyone. So definitely the delivery of healthcare and how we do it in this country, this has caused us to have to look at it in a much different way. Cobra is too expensive when folks get laid off and they have to pay Cobra. That should definitely be a part of what is included in the stimulus, is a way for people to have some way of continuing their health coverage while they're not working. So, in the short term, we need to find ways to make sure that everyone has access to health care. In the longer term, we need to find a different way of making sure that everyone has access to health care when they're sick. That's a basic right.
Billy, I'm going to go to you next. I just want people to know we could see their comments. Zoe K says she's all for universal health care. I see Justin Leslie's watching. Thank you all for watching. We've got about 100 people watching live, which is a pretty good live streaming number. Most people usually watch this after the fact. And I see a couple other people saying, are there any health officials or doctors on this advisory board? I believe there are. So keep your questions coming. I appreciate them. If we don't get to them on air, we can always go back and answer them in the comments. Billy, what do you think about the healthcare answer and what we've learned now about employer-based insurance?
Well, I think, from a union perspective, Justin, that gets to be such a touchy thing because of all that's been given up to make sure that union members have good health care. Do I believe we need to move towards universal health care? Absolutely. Do I also believe, like Vonda, that what we've seen is a fault in the system when all of a sudden we have such a huge unemployment increase that there's no ways for folks to have health care during those periods. And it goes back to, there should be a system in place in this country, the richest country in the world. When people have adversity, they shouldn't have to struggle to have health care. And I'll be honest with you, Justin, I'm surprised companies haven't pushed for universal health care. Vonda, back all the way to 2009, when we were in negotiations, I think the company said it's somewhere around $55 million they spent for health care over a 3-year period. That's $55 million that could be used to reinvest into the factories and other places. And I'm surprised companies haven't, told the federal government, look, we can use this money to reinvest in this country and not have to use taxpayer dollars. We can use our own dollars.
Warren Buffett calls the healthcare system in America the tapeworm on American business for that exact reason. Other countries, their businesses don't have to pay health insurance for their employees. Imagine what you could do with that money. I completely agree with you. There is a business argument for something like Medicare for all or universal health care. There's a guy everybody should follow. His name is Wendell Potter. He used to work for Cigna as a health insurance executive, and he used to make the arguments that they continue to make. He realized that he was arguing against people so strongly. He is now a Medicare for all advocate. He's runs a group called Businesses for Medicare for All. Exactly what you're talking about. Where are the businesses in this conversation? It's time to start thinking more forward thinking. It's time to think outside the box. This virus has given us a chance to have these conversations, and I hope people will take it. We can't go back to normal, like Billy started this conversation saying. Normal is gone. There is no normal anymore. One more question for you guys. I won't keep you forever. Let's say we go back to work and people start getting sick, workers start getting sick at their jobs. What recourse do we have? Do businesses have? Do workers have? If that starts to happen, what can people do? You know, because we're now moving into a time frame where, okay, businesses are open, so theoretically the stimulus and these things are going to stop pertaining to the workers. What recourse will workers have, non-union and union workers?
So I would say that that's why um, this recovery has to be based on data and not a date. And that when you do identify hot spots, like have been identified here at Tyson and at a few other workplaces, that you do social tracing, make sure that folks are able to access tests, and perhaps sometimes you have to back down the lever of folks returning to work. Perhaps you have to um, spread out the shifts so that you don't have as many people in the workplace at one time, so you can social distance. I think that employers and union reps in places where they don't have unions, workers are going to have to, in partnership, think through how to keep workplaces as safe as possible.
Billy, how about you? What would you say to workers as we go back to work here? If people start to get sick, what recourse do they have, or is this just the kind of thing where we're at the mercy of the gods?
And I think you're right, Justin. I think that workers are being the bait to see if this thing's going to work. If it works, people are going to say, "See, I told you. You know, it's all great. It never was as bad as we thought." But if it doesn't work, the workers are going to pay the price. We've always paid the price. You know, it's one of those things. And Justin, you know, and I said this, you know, you hear that thing, I'm just glad I got a job, you know, and I hate that. I hate that. I've said this before. We've been conditioned, especially in the South, to say, "Oh, we're just glad we got a job." But there's time for us now to step back and say, you know what, it's more to have a job. It's to have a life, and to not be put in a situation where you're going to put me at risk and my family at risk, your family at risk, your children, your grandchildren, and your mothers and fathers, just to go to work. And so I'm hoping that this goes well, and I'm hoping that people will get what they need when they go back to work, that there'll be testing, like Vonda said, maybe spreading the hours out, doing things so that people can stay safe. We better all pray that that's how it works.
Yeah, sorry, I think that's really true. You know, we definitely, it's the workers that have the most to lose. And what we've seen over the course of this virus, just the last month and a half, we've seen workers sort of realize their strength, and we've seen strikes even pop up in certain places, Amazon, for instance, and there were a couple others, I think Kroger's, and people I saw saying, well, this isn't the time for that. Actually, this is the time for that. You know, right now is when workers need to realize that their strength and operate from a place of strength. And what that means is, you know, realizing that we have value, what our worth is, and doing it together. And that's why, you know, being a union is all about solidarity and togetherness, because that's the only way you can get anything done. You know, and when I always try to, when I have this conversation about unions, I mean, you know, everything's a mixed bag. You know, I get that sometimes unions abuse their power, but on balance, you know, workers need to have a voice, and that's what unions are. And most of the time I'm arguing with somebody who is a fan of sports. And what I would say is, imagine if there was no players union, and if you're an NBA fan, and the NBA players weren't participating in the upside of those leagues, and we're still making nothing while these leagues were making exorbitant amounts of money. Workers need to feel like the players in that equation. Workers need to feel like they have value, just like the players in those leagues have value, because these companies don't go anywhere without workers. So, you know, you wouldn't ask your favorite athlete not to participate in the upside of those leagues And you shouldn't ask workers not to participate in the upside of these companies. And we've seen companies grow exponentially over the course of the last few decades, and workers and the median wage has not. And so we can't let that go on. And so that's why I appreciate your voices in this whole thing. Just as some last words of wisdom here, Billy, what do you feel like saying to the workers out there that might be watching?
Well, I think the most importantly is that no matter what happens, you know, we're going to be here for you, regardless of whether you're union or non-union. And we're going to continue to push people like myself and Vonda, yourself, Justin, and we appreciate what you do and what you've been doing. But we're going to keep fighting the fight. You know, I always thought when I got older I was going to retire, but it seems like the older I get, the more I want to fight at times. Now I'm a little more calm in some of my reactions as opposed to when I was young. But that's what our young folks are for. Our young folks have got that fire. We have to be the ones, the elders that guide them in the right directions and get working people where they need to be. And we're going to get them there. It's coming.
How about you, Vonda? Some last words for folks?
So I would say that workers, there are rights that workers have, regardless of whether you have a union or not. And folks should spend some time during this time educating themselves about their rights. When we stand together collectively, we have the power to change things. We can and we will. And this pandemic has shown us, it's really created a path forward for us, because now we know what the fault lines are and where we have much work to do. So.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you both for what you do. I see Robert Schooner made a comment I just want to hit on real quick. He said, cruel capitalism for the poor, socialism for the rich. That's exactly right. It's capitalism, greed for everybody else. And then for the rich, it's socialism. Look at what's happening. The market started to tank. They started pumping trillions of dollars into businesses. So that whole socialism refrain, they use it to attack unions. They use it to attack healthcare. It is bullshit. And, you know, I'm not gonna use kid gloves with that anymore. They love socialism when it helps them. They don't mind bailouts for farmers. They don't mind bailouts for companies. And then they turn around and tell us that we're, you know, socialists because we want to help each other out. Everything requires a balance. We don't want real socialism. We don't want only capitalism. This is about a balance and finding that balance. And so I ask people, when they yell socialism at you, when they're talking about unions or talking about anything else, you know, don't take that. Don't listen to that. That's old. It's boring. And it's time to move forward and move past that stuff. So thank you both for what you do. And maybe we can come back on and talk about the next time Governor Lee gives workers the shaft.
Look forward to it. Thank you for
Justin.
inviting me.
Take care.